Hello again, this is James Byrne, and today I'm going to share with you an episode why I believe Joseph Smith was a monogamist. And because he was a monogamist and his constant denouncing of polygamy, his excommunicating of members, and bringing charges against people accusing him that he was involved or allowing polygamy, misusing his name. Uh, the polygamists who would, after his death, come to rule the church or be leaders of the church, um, had to change the narrative. So any documents, talks, everything and anything that showed that Joseph Smith advocated monogamy was, had to be changed because they believed in practicing polygamy. So we'll show how now, as we share this document, that after the martyrdom of Joseph and Hyrum, Brigham Young commenced work on a compilation of church history in which he and his scribes made numerous revisions to original journals and notes, as noted in Brigham's journal, 1st of April 1845. I commenced revising the history of Joseph Smith at Brother Richard's office. And let's go to that link. Note the 1st of April 1845. Let's zoom in on it. There you're looking at it. I commence revising the history of Joseph at Brother Richard's office. Elder Heber C. Kimball and George A. Smith were with me. President Joseph Smith had corrected 42 pages before his massacre. It afforded us great satisfaction to hear Brother Richards read the history of the infancy of the church. So there's a revising going on here, and we'll show exactly what was being revised. Why would it need to be revised? What was wrong with the original? Well, before I go into it, the original was monogamy. The revised was to make the documents and everything look like Joseph agreed and was going along with polygamy. This effort continued for months. Some of the so-called revisions included deletions, entire speeches, and sections of speeches. Here's an example of a text that was omitted at the direction of Brigham Young. The text is crossed out, and we can see a notation in the left-hand margin not to go in by be wise orders. Let's go to that to show you what I'm talking about. And if we can zoom in, yep, let's bring it up there. Can you see that there now? Not to go in by Brigham, that's be wise orders. So you may be wondering what was being crossed out. And this is showing the text that was crossed out. And we're going to go into an example of exactly what kind of things was crossed out, a draft made, and then the revised speech, which in a lot of cases totally either omitted or changed the whole context of it. I mean, why not leave the original speech there present that was given by Brigham, or I mean, Joseph Smith or Hyrum Smith, unless Brigham and his leaders in Utah wanted it to be changed to mean something else. So we'll see exactly this very case. Um, here's an example. Minutes from a meeting, 8 of April 1844. We see a few additions being made in the manuscript, different handwritings. So view across 3 documents. So we're going to use the phrase here, um, the how many spiritual wives a man may have. I know nothing about it. This is the original one now that we're linking to. Uh, in consequence of, I'm not able to read this as well, in consequence of the 1,000 reports from abroad to inquire if thing any man, how many how many wives a man may have. I know nothing about it. So that's the original there. Let's go to Hiram's speech. Right. What do we see? We see crossouts in this revised thing. So we have this interpolation. President Joseph Smith turned over the conference into the hands of the 12. So, there's nothing about, as you see down there, 10,000 reports which made to be from abroad. Every foolish man inquire if how many spiritual wives a man may have. I know nothing about it. It's crossed out, and clearly you can see that handwriting put in from someone else, um, turned over to the 12, and then it's saying like, see addenda page 11. So we're meant to go to page 11 and skip this talk that Hiram's given, which was discussing about spiritual wives. And then we go to the revised edition, and you can see, if going down through it, it has nothing to do with how many wives can a man have, to which Hiram says, I know nothing about it. There's nothing in there. So this is a total manipulation and change from the original text. So as I said, this particular draft 2, with all the notes, crossouts, and other person's handwriting put in of Hiram, 8 of April 1844, we can see that the entire speech has been crossed out to indicate that it should be omitted from the final version of history that was being compiled. And the excerpt 3 there that I showed was the revised, in which Hyrum's fiery speech has been omitted and replaced with a mildly worded summary that does not resemble the original at all. The Joseph Smith papers editors acknowledge that this revised version of Hyrum's speech was created over a decade later in 1855 or 56. I mean, talk about manipulation and revising. They want to get the monogamy narrative taken out and put the polygamy narrative forward. Another example, October 5th, 1843, the following important entry was recorded in Joseph's journal by his scribe, with whom he had been discussing holding disciplinary court counsel of those practicing polygamy. Gave the instruction to try those who were preaching, teaching, and practicing the doctrine of polygamy, plurality of wives. On this law, Joseph forbids it, and the practice thereof. No man shall have but have one wife. So this is the original. See it there? Joseph forbids it, and the practice thereof. No man shall have but one wife. That's the original. Let's go to the revised. What do we see? Crossouts again. What's that in there? To be revised. What do we see also amongst the crossouts? We see this by obviously a different handwriting. For according to the law, I hold the keys of this power in the last days, for there is never but one on earth at a time on whom the power and its keys are conferred. And I have continually said, no man shall have but one wife at any time, unless the Lord says otherwise. So, I mean, it's given the narrative over to the polygamists to just allow polygamy, going from what the original text, as you see there, Joseph forbids it, and the practice thereof. They are then allowing it unless the Lord directs over it otherwise. So what was the final written edition? This is the final edition then. Gave instruction to try those who preach and teaching practice doctrine. For according to the law, I hold the power in the last days, for there is never one on the earth at the time whom the power and its keys are conferred. And I constantly say, no man shall have but one wife at that time, unless the Lord directs otherwise. So that's the final draft, going from the original to the final revised. It's totally misrepresents what Joseph originally had written in the journal of the 5th of October, 1843. Other examples, we have Joseph Smith made it address that the church had not received any license from him to commit adultery, fornication, or any other thing, but to the contrary, he condemned the principle in total. Well, it says toto, which is in there in the original. um, in total. But the draft, let's look at the final version of what was put up. I condemned such actions in total, warned the people against committing such evils. Surely will bring. Uh, so the meaning of is lost in this. They're slanting it to warn the people against committing such evils. It's not the, the whole address had to do with Joseph Smith uh, saying that the church had not received any license to commit adultery or fornication, and it's been revised down to mean something general. So this is a misrepresentation of Joseph Smith's words, his original words that have been revised and altered. Charges against Sagers by his wife Lucinda. That's the link there in the Joseph Smith papers. Inasmuch as you have declared officially that you will deal with all persons who have taught or have taught the abominable doctrine of spiritual wives, this is to notify you that Harrison Sagers is guilty of the said sin, which thing can be proven by credible witnesses. And this was written by Lucinda Sagers, um, uh, Harrison Sagers' wife. So this then was submitted, and the stake president William Marks received a note and requested Sagers to appear to answer the charges. So I want to, in this episode, just mention that after the death of Joseph and Hyrum, Brigham Young recounted numerous stories of private conversations he claimed to have had with both men. One such story is repeated in the book Saints, the Standard of Truth, in which Brigham says that Hyrum approached him one day in 1843, begging for information that Brigham and the 12 seemed to have, but of which Hyrum, beloved brother of the prophet and co-president of the church, was somewhat ignorant. According to the Brigham story, which he told in 1866, Hyrum was brought to tears over the realization that in his ignorance he had been preaching against polygamy, unaware that this holy doctrine had secretly been revealed to Joseph. Yet Hyrum's strongly worded speech just 2.5 months before his death does not agree with Brigham's story of his tearful conversion to polygamy more than a year earlier. It's very instructive to note that the contemporary record of Hyrum's anti-polygamy speech was omitted from Brigham's history of the church, while his own pro-polygamy recollection from over 2 decades later was included. That kind of tells the story. And here is the actual dates where they were revising. And there's a reference, History of the Church 73389, commence revising history at Brother Richard's office, revising church history, revising, all the way down, people in on it here, throughout from April, May into November, revising history. That's Heber C. Kimball, Willard Richards, George A. Smith were with Brigham Young in revising the history. And you've seen the revisions that they have already clearly done in omitting, totally destroying the meaning of text and crossing out other parts. Now, the witnesses. We have a witness, Charles Wesley Wandell, was an assistant church historian under Brigham Young, recorded the following in his diary. Having been employed in the historian's office at Nauvoo, I know that after Joseph's death, his memoir was doctored to suit the new order of things, and this too by the direct order of Brigham Young. Let's Inez Smith. There's an article here in which this is spoken about, revising it. There we are. It's Inez Smith, the biography of Charles Wesley Wendell, Journal of History. There you have the reference for it. And we have another witness, as I said. Members of the Quorum of the 12 engaged in an organized, dedicated effort to revise the history, making hundreds of deletions, additions and altercations to Joseph Smith's history. Few outside Brigham Young's inner circle were aware of the behind-the-scenes alterations so seamlessly stitched into church history. An assistant church historian in 1845 observed that after Joseph Smith, this memoir was doctored to suit the new order of things. Richard S. Van Wagner, and it's worthwhile reading this too. The Full History of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was published in a book under the direction of the First Presidency in 1902. The introduction assurance that no historical or doctrinal statement had been changed is demonstratively wrong, overshadowed by editorial censorship, hundreds of deletions, additions, alterations. These 7 volumes are not always reliable. So it talks about Brigham Young's inner circle. No one outside knew of what was going on. So there was a pattern of revisions. The source, say the original document, Joseph's journal supporting polygamy, Nauvoo City Council meeting minutes removed, evidence that Joseph and Hyrum condemned spiritual wives, times and seasons, omitted notes of excommunication for preaching polygamy. Joseph's journal removed verbiage to obscure Joseph's likely authorship. Letters removed. Conference address edited to support polygamy. Entire talk was eventually removed. A general conference talk. Now, just briefly, for a few minutes, I thought included in this episode, I should put something in about that we should be accountable for our own actions. Why do I say this? Because what happened there, though I'm not saying all the members of the church who left Nauvoo and headed west with Brigham Young, that all of them followed Brigham and the leaders exactly in everything. But the majority of members followed along with the polygamy narrative, though especially women knew in their hearts it was abominable and it was against their best tastes and just felt it was totally wrong, and all the evilness that surrounds it. So I want to share here that the prophet Joseph Smith counseled members in this talk to stand or fall on your own, be accountable for your own actions, and had the members there being accountable for their own actions, then following the polygamous leaders, more of this polygamy episode wouldn't have, and the grief and sorrow that it caused wouldn't have played out. President Joseph Smith rose, read 14th chapter of Ezekiel, said the Lord had declared by the prophets that the people should each one stand for himself and depend on no man or men in the state of corruption of the Jewish church, that righteous persons could only deliver their own souls, applied it to the present state of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, said if the people departed from the Lord, they must fall, that they were depending on the prophet, hence were darkened in their minds from neglect of themselves, envious towards the innocent, while they're afflict the virtuous with envies of shafts of envy. There it is in the Joseph Smith papers for the full details of that. And this goes along with what Jesus Christ himself taught in Mark chapter 9, verses 43, 48. Well, there was a Joseph Smith translation of this. Let's go to verse 44. Therefore, let every man stand or fall by himself, and not for another, or not trusting another. And if thine eye, which see it for thee, him that is anointed to watch over thee, to show thee light, become a transgressor, and offend thee, pluck him out. Now, it's not a literal thing, plucking out the eye or chopping off the hand. These are symbolical references. He that's your guide or your leader, and he's leading you astray because you know it just is wrong. You're accountable for your own actions. Cast him off if he's leading you astray. In a similar way, uh, if there's another example, if thy foot offend thee, cut it off. For he that is thy standard, by whom thy walketh, if become a transgressor, he shall be cut off. It is better to halt into life than having 2 feet be cast into hell. The idea there that the person that's your example or that you're following, that's your feet, is a transgressor and leading you astray. You need to cut him off. There's no use following him in his transgression. The idea here that Joseph Smith is trying to get is we're accountable for our own actions. And as the Book of Mormon says in 2nd Nephi chapter 28, verse 26, woe be unto him that hearkeneth unto the precepts of man. Precepts man, like polygamy, lead us astray and do us harm spiritually. 2nd Nephi 28, verse 31, cursed is he that putteth his trust in man, or make flesh his arm, or shall hearken unto the precepts of men. We are meant to take the leader as our guide, and it's the Holy Spirit. There's other occasions in the scriptures, Jeremiah chapter 11, verse 10, Alma 31, verse 9, Matthew 13, verse 15, 2 Nephi 28, verse 26, where leaders can lead astray. They're, they are mortal men just like you and me and can lead us astray. And it's happened. So we got to be accountable for our own actions and bring it to God, who's our guide and inspiration. And that's the episode I'm going to share with you today. So as we spoke about there, we see there was revisions done. That was clearly, and um, the revisions was to revise text, downplaying the monogamy narrative that Joseph Smith and Hyrum were clearly condemning it and promoting the words of polygamousness, accepting it. And people then could point back to Joseph Smith or Hyrum's words and talks showing that, oh, yes, they were promoting polygamy, when in fact the original documents show they were totally against it. And God in scriptures, as we say again, that episode in scriptures sees it as an abomination, abhorrence, and which he's angry with the inhabitants of the earth at practicing it. And we spoke about, yes, we're accountable for our own actions. So thank you for listening to this episode, and we shall speak again in future episodes. I hope you can join me. Take care. Bye for now.